Welcome to another edition, our 101st episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, where all voices matter. The clock continues to tick on the Enbridge Line 5 pipeline. So far, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer has not budged in her position to shut it all down. As this drama unfolds, there are real economic impacts for Canadians, Michiganders, and more. Our very special guest today is Jack Bergman. He is retired Lieutenant General, and he is the current Congressman for Michigan's 1st District, which encompasses the Upper Peninsula. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Tony, it's my honor to be with you.
I guess the first question would be, from your perspective, obviously as a member of Congress representing the Upper Peninsula, what's the current state of things with Line 5?
Well, it depends on who you ask, but as you know, that's a state level issue that Michigan and Enbridge have worked on for a long time. And unfortunately, it's unnecessarily adversarial because the governor and the folks who don't understand really what truly pipeline safety is about are not listening to Enbridge and others, uninterested third parties, who actually say a pipeline is safe, especially when it comes to what Enbridge has proposed to build the tunnel underneath the Straits of Mackinac, out of the water, under the rock. It's an absolutely spectacular, not new technology solution, but it's the way going forward. So unfortunately, going back to answering your question, the challenge is we got too many people in Michigan leadership roles who are not listening not only to Enbridge and the other folks who do the industrial part, but to the Michiganders who say, hey, you're going to put us in harm's way here when it comes to heating in the winter, being able to provide jobs, doing all of those things that a well-run operation leads to, a good economy.
Yeah, and obviously from the province of Ontario, 45% of the oil goes through Line 5, so there's a clear line of concern when people are talking about shutting that down. But can you maybe describe for our audience how Line 5 is important for your constituents?
Well, sure. Running across the Upper Peninsula, it does two big things. It provides jobs, but it provides propane at a reasonable cost. And last time I checked, we need propane in the wintertime in the Upper Peninsula. Yeah. I can tell you that, the majority of homes in the Upper Peninsula and even parts of the upper lower Michigan heat with propane because they do not have natural gas lines that come to their home. So the governor's plan, which really isn't a plan, it's more of a pipe dream, and that's pun intended in a serious way, doesn't reflect a caring for the constituents of the Upper Peninsula.
And are you actually starting to hear this from your constituents as well? Are they concerned about this?
I've heard it literally since I came into office about almost 4.5 years ago. I heard that even while I was running before getting elected, that we need to keep Pipeline 5, number one, safe, number two, open, and number three, look for viable alternatives that will get the pipeline out of the water of the Straits because of the health of the Great Lakes. Whether it's the United States or Canada, we need a healthy Great Lakes, the quality of water and all of those things that go with it, because that's a big part of both of our economies.
Absolutely. And are you getting a sense that the governor is getting some flack on this, or is it just impervious at this point?
I got a hunch she's getting a lot of flack. The only question is she and her folks on her staff listening to the positive results potential from a good decision that involves a new tunnel and a new pipeline? But it takes two people to have a conversation, and one of them has to be listening. And I'm not exactly sure that we've had much listening going on in Lansing for the last, let's say, couple of years anyway.
We're having a conversation with Congressman Jack Bergman. He represents the Upper Peninsula, Michigan's 1st District, and we'll continue this conversation after the break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Jack Bergman. He is the current congressman for the Michigan's 1st District, encompassing the Upper Peninsula. We're talking about Line 5, Enbridge Line 5. Congressman, I understand that labor leaders also are quite concerned about the stance taken by the governor. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, sure. I mean, let's face it. Unions, good union jobs, need to be stable and long-term. A pipeline is stable and long-term, but probably more importantly I would guess, depending on which labor union it is, they're excited about actually the construction of a tunnel. That's going to secure some jobs for a period of time up in the northern Michigan, Upper Peninsula area. And the labor leaders understand that what a good economy needs is stability so that the companies that provide the jobs can stay in business and therefore provide the job for their union members. And this is a job killer. To shut down Line 5 is just a job killer. And it's, again, as I said earlier, it's not a plan. It's a pipe dream dreamed up by folks who really are not actually in touch with the needs of all of the people in northern Michigan and the UP.
Now, I just want to return to one of the things you said, because I think it's very important. You talked about safety and how the new tunnel will be safer. Is the basic position to keep the current line open until the new tunnel is built? Is that the way that you'd like to see things go? Absolutely, because that pipeline, I've been up there, I've inspected it, if you will, on how the operations are run on both sides of the straits. I haven't been able to get into a submersible yet and go down. I would love to do that, but I don't think I'll get that opportunity. But the idea that the safety monitoring of that pipeline is second to none. And the fact is there's shut-off valves on both sides of the straits. So the data is out there that says if there was some type of small leak, the quick response of the folks in charge of safety of the pipeline, it is not going to affect the long-term health of the Straits of Mackinac in the waters. Right. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I'd love to get your advice on this. How can Canadian political leaders best advocate on this issue, do you think? Well, I think, a couple of things. I'm involved with the Canadian government as if you will, as an ambassador, if you will, parliamentary ambassador. They got all these long titles. I'm just a Marine, so I don't get too much into the long titles. But the idea is that our Canadian counterparts, the education that they can provide not only for your Canadian citizens, but for the American citizens, but also for those folks in Canada who are advocating for good environmental policy. It's time to energize those folks to engage their counterparts here in the U.S. when you really are discussing what good environmental policy looks like as it relates to, let's say, the Great Lakes here and the pipeline coming through the Straits. Because if there was to be a negative event in the Straits and the pipeline, it affects not only the U.S., it affects Canada as well. So this is truly an opportunity for both groups to work together, but involves education, rational education, not emotional education of, oh my God, what could go wrong? And the safety records for all of these companies. And let's face it, they're being looked at. So you have to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Otherwise, you'll be held accountable. I guess one of the things is if the line is shut down, you're talking about a massive number of trucks and freight trains that will be carrying the oil. So from an environmental perspective, it's not great either. Well, you want to talk about, we used to use the term here in Washington, D.C., fuzzy math.
I mean, when you want to talk about a real case of fuzzy math with the amount of trucks, the amount of rail lines, which a lot of them don't exist, the math doesn't add up even anywhere close. Again, going back to it's a pipe dream that somebody who really is not trying to do the right thing is put together. There's no way that the amount of trucks necessary can haul the amount of fluids, oil, whatever, gas coming through the pipe, that it could be done not only economically, but more importantly, safely. You compromise safety if you start putting all that into trucks.
And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with the retired Lieutenant General Jack Bergman. He is the current congressman for Michigan's 1st District, encompassing the Upper Peninsula, talking about Line 5 and all of those issues. Congressman, let me just take it from another angle then. Is there anything that Congress can do about this?
Well, not really, because the agreement, which was written literally back in the 1950s, was written between the state of Michigan and Enbridge. Okay, so there's not a federal oversight role here other than to look from a safety standpoint through our federal agencies. So this really has to be between the state of Michigan and Enbridge, and it's okay. If the government really took an honest look at the pluses and minuses of building the tunnel, I believe she would be very wise to throw her support entirely behind the project and the tunnel. And I'll tell you why. Number one, it's the right thing to do for your constituents. But guess what? I think it's time we built a second tunnel under the Straits of Mackinac that could take the biggest semi that travels the road. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, as the governor of Michigan, she is responsible for moving goods and services in the event of a disaster, an emergency. And let's say that you have to do that. The governor calls out the National Guard, and just for the sake of discussion, the Mackinac Bridge is closed for high winds, ice falling, accident. What do you do? So the governor could really get a big win when it comes to keeping Michiganders safe and secure if she went ahead and supported this tunnel. So now I can get involved at a future time as a second tunnel, because that would be part of the interstate system. So it's a win-win.
And is there some serious discussion or proposals for a second tunnel like that?
Well, not yet. And some people are hearing this for the first time, although there have been low-level discussions about infrastructure here across the United States. And how do we do the right thing for all of our citizens? But when you think about the interstate system and what it provides for our country, the safety and security, a second tunnel, by the way, tunneling is not new. It's been going on for thousands of years. And we have an opportunity to kind of do a test project in what it's going to cost to build the first tunnel. And Enbridge is going to foot that bill. But now it allows me as the congressman for Northern Michigan to help with funds and a plan to build a second tunnel.
Now, a question in a similar vein. Obviously, we have the Biden administration. The Secretary of Energy happens to be former governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm. Does she have any role in this at all? Any pressure that she can bear or not bear?
Well, I think in her role, she will have not necessarily oversight, but she will probably get a chance to make comment on some of the environmental issues. So I'm confident and hopeful that Secretary Granholm will see the wisdom in building the tunnel, especially when it comes to environmental safety.
So they'll have an impact in terms of the future plans for the tunnel, but they won't have a say on this immediate crisis issue. Is that right?
That is correct. I mean, environmental studies have pretty much all been finished. There's always the chance that somebody could propose something else. Well, let's take a look at this. but most of the, if not all of the major environmental study pieces have already been done.
Absolutely. What do you see happening I mean, we're almost in May right now. Do you have any predictions about what's going to happen?
Yeah. The only prediction I would have is that simply that the state of Michigan, under Governor Whitmer's leadership, they can have such a positive effect for the entire state, and especially in the people in the Upper Peninsula, to provide the necessary propane, but also to provide the commerce necessary to rebuild our economy after a year of COVID. So I'm just hoping that the governor will take advantage of this opportunity. It's the right thing for Michiganders, so therefore she should be behind it.
We're going to continue our discussion with Jack Bergman. He is the current congressman for Michigan's 1st District, encompassing the Upper Peninsula. After this break, please stay with us. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, as always, Tony Clement, here with Congressman for Michigan's 1st District, Jack Bergman. Congressman, I'd love to get your sense of the Canada-U.S. relationship, political relationship, trade relationship. Obviously, representing the Upper Peninsula, you have a lot of information and understanding of Canada, which may not be as general, shall we say, amongst your colleagues, because you're up against it every day. So what's your sense of how the relationship is and where it might be in the future?
Well, I think one of the best things to happen to the relationship between the U.S. and Canada was the passage and implementation of the USMCA, which happened under President Trump's administration a couple of years ago. Because, let's face it, any trade agreement ages over time. There's a lot of factors that change over time, and NAFTA needed to be upgraded. And under President Trump's leadership, it got upgraded, and those kind of agreements only get upgraded if both parties agree. So I think it was a great opportunity for both of our countries to sit at the, if you will, the negotiating table and come to agreement that will hopefully last, another 10, 20 years at the most, because then things will change, right, and we will have to renegotiate it. And that's how countries work together. It's not just a one and done. It's continually negotiating agreements, monitoring the results, and see where you need to make the adjustments to make a deal better.
And you said that you're involved in, say, a congressional parliamentary organization. So you do have a good relationship with the Canadian members of Parliament, then? Absolutely. We don't see each other enough.
Let's face it, we haven't had any of the meetings we were planned to have scheduled for the last year because of the pandemic situation. But I am hopeful that we can get back, face to face and, to talk sooner rather than later. And, I've had meetings prior down in the Detroit area because it's a great place. You can cross the bridge, right, and, come in from Canada, and it's a great place for people to travel to. But as neighboring countries, if we're not talking with one another, if we're not listening to one another to see where the commonalities are, and we're always going to have, friction points, but iron out the friction points and move forward. But it's that consistency of open communication that is going to enable both of our countries to really prosper here, over the next few decades.
Wonderful, sir.
We've got a great history of working together. And I spent a lot of time back when I was in uniform with the Canadian Armed Forces.
Oh, and very good.
I tell you what, we did a lot of joint exercises. And we, if the suited government did as good a job of communicating, working together as the uniformed military services of both countries, I think we'd be in pretty darn good shape.
That sounds good. Well, we've got 1 minute left. I know that's not a lot of time for anybody, but I'd love to get a sense in 1 minute what your current congressional priorities are.
Well, number one, represent the constituents in the 1st District. all 24,500 square miles of them, all 700 plus thousand of them. And that doesn't mean agreement. It just means represent and do the right thing for everybody, not just a few. But from a policy standpoint, we here in the U.S. need an infrastructure bill that will take us forward into the 21st century. And that's going to tie into Canada because of bridges, tunnels, all sorts of border checkpoints, whatever it is. But we need a major element of that infrastructure package has to be the delivery of broadband, so high-speed internet to the rural and remote places, not only at the 1st District of Michigan, but to other places who are rural and remote around the U.S. as well. But those are my biggest priorities as far as projects. And the other piece is working together with colleagues from the other side of the aisle. And the only thing I feel bad for the American people and the Canadian people who watch American media is you don't see the hard, good work done every day. Democrats, Republicans working together all day, every day to hash out good policy. It's there. It's just not visible.
Congressman, I just want to thank you for being part of our program today, and certainly I wish you well as you represent Michiganders. Good luck, sir.
Thank you, Tony. My pleasure.
For sure. Really interesting to get perspective of a U.S. congressman on this very important Line 5 issue. We'll continue to cover this. You can be sure of that. Thanks for watching.